and welcome to Evil Knits. My name is Evie, or Evie, and this is my second podcast episode. Last week I uploaded my first episode, and thank you if you watched that. It really means a lot to me. Since then, exactly 1 week has passed, so today it's April 2nd. It's a very grey day here in northern Germany. It's grey, it's a little bit rainy, and it's quite cold, which is good for wearing knitwear. Not so good for everything else, pretty much. Today, as promised last week, I don't have as many FOs to share with you. In fact, I only have one FO, but I have brought some plans with me, so I will chat a little bit about that at the end of the episode. But before we get even into the FO, I would like to talk about what I'm wearing. Let me put aside my basket of yarn and knits. So I am wearing a sweater that has a name that I will, disclaimer, pronounce incorrectly. This one is called the Vrije sweater. It's a pattern, I think the only garment pattern by the lovely Inga of Knitting Traditions. And I was lucky to be accepted to the test of this sweater last summer. I started this one in June and finished it in July of 2025. And it, as you can see, has a turtleneck. And then the main attraction of this sweater is the cable details, not only in the raglan, but also at the armpit. It kind of splits and runs down the sleeve, runs down the body, and then if I get up, it's also on the lower half of the body. And I knitted the second size, I think, in the turtleneck and tapered option. So I have done decreases to shape the body, and other than that, it is to pattern. The yarn I used is from Woolly Knit. It is the Worth Mill DK in the colorway Aran Nep. The yarn is, I believe, discontinued. I'm not sure if they have come back with a newer, better version of it. But at least the label has changed. I'm not sure if you can get this yarn anymore. This yarn came in a plastic bag pack of 5 100-gram balls with 200 meters each. So a normal DK weights, and it is quite a rustic yarn. I'm quite okay at tolerating the itch of rustic wool, even in a turtleneck. So I can feel that it's rustic, but it's not, I don't get the urge to itch. Yeah. This was, the yarn is moving. This was okay to work with. I have to be honest, I wouldn't buy this yarn again. I would buy other Woolly Knit yarn again, definitely, but not this one. It is really quite rustic and there was a lot of vegetable matter in it. I had 2 sweaters quantities of this yarn actually. And the other colorway I had was called Cinnamon. It was a very warm red, and I actually also used that in another sweater test knit. I knitted my Ariandel in that one, and it worked, but again, I'm also happy that I have used up the yarn. For this one, I am thinking about opening up the bind off of the turtleneck, because you pick up for the neckline and then knit upwards. And because I find that the turtleneck is not super practical for me, I'm thinking about undoing it and then just having a little crew neck, maybe double folded collar. But I will think about that a little bit more before I actually do it. I do really like this yarn, the quite natural white with the black naps of different sizes. Looks really nice and gives a little bit of interest to the fabric, but does not take away from the cables. Okay, I think I can talk about my one FO. It was my only whip last episode, if I'm remembering correctly. And there's a needle trapped in here. This does not belong here. This is the Day and Night Cowl by Drea. As you can see, it has this beautiful pattern with slipped stitches and 2 contrasting colors. And this is a cowl, meaning it's a closed circle. And it has this bandana style shaping. And you may have spotted already this, if I'm holding the seam in the middle, is not very symmetrical. If I'm holding it like this, it kind of looks symmetrical, but then the seam is quite to the side. And I was super confused by this. When I showed this on the last episode, I thought I had a good chunk more to go, but actually I was quite close to binding off. And I thought I had more to knit because the shaping was not symmetrical. I was expecting there to be more decreases and then more fabric until you bind off and sew the whole piece together, but that didn't happen. So I have a few pictures that I will put here. When I bound off, the shape was really odd and I found it quite difficult to understand why. I went back to the pattern and looked if I did anything wrong, but I didn't, so it must be a row gauge thing. Although my row gauge looks fine. I mean, all of the squares are like quite square. Maybe my row gauge is a little bit tight, but I also had a look at the projects on Ravelry of this project, and I found that a lot of people actually had the same problem. That the shape was just not symmetrical, and someone even wrote they thought they had made a mistake, but I looked at the pattern, at the pictures that they uploaded, and it looked just like mine. So I'm not too sure what's up with that, but I let it soak in warm water and then blocked it to what it should look like, and that kind of worked. I have another picture here that shows it's just blocked and it looks symmetrical there, but when I kind of picked it up and handled it a little bit and sewed the edges together at the back here, this is what the seam looks like. It kind of, shaped back into not quite what it was. It's definitely not as bad as it was, but also not as good as it was when it was freshly blocked. I haven't worn this out yet. I also have yet to take good pictures of this, but it will be pretty cute. I can throw it on for a second. Yeah, I'm not super thrilled with this. I'm not unhappy with it, but I'm just a little bit... I'm thinking about the fact that this is knitted correctly and it should be nicer than it is, but I don't know. I don't really care that the seam is at the side. I think it looks good and it's still practical. As I said last week, I knitted this in Drops Daisy in the colors 1 for the whites and 3 for the black. And yeah, as I said, I didn't even wear this outside, but you can kind of see that the fabric is starting to age already. Like there are some hairs coming loose and it just looks like it's been handled a lot more than it actually has been. But yeah, I went into this project using this yarn, knowing that this would probably happen. So I am okay with this. I really, really like the stitch pattern. Maybe I will steal it for something else, maybe a hot water bottle cover or something. Of both colors, I have 35 grams left, meaning I have used 65 grams of each of these colors of a DK weight yarn. That's the only FO of this episode. Next I have one single whip. I know this episode is not very project heavy, but along with this whip, I'm going to show you my sewing FO. I don't know what's going on. I am kind of motivated to get better at sewing, and so I'll show you what I've sewn and what's my current whip. As you can maybe see, this thing up here, this is called a DPN holder, and I made this again with wonky stitching, but with working buttons. I don't know what their proper name is. Yeah, and then the lining looks like this. The lining is a 100% cotton, and then the outside is some kind of faux leather, velvet leather things from my stash that I didn't care that much about. And at the same time of making this, which by the way makes a funny noise, I don't know, I kind of like it. So yeah, at the same time of making this, I made this one, which has the exact same fabrics, just switched. And yeah, for this one I used brown buttons, as you can see, and for this one I used orange buttons because I liked it, the monochrome look. And yeah, they turned out well, they function. As you can see, these are 15 centimeter DPNs, and they all fit in here pretty nicely. I was afraid that this would be too small, but I like to kind of fold these needles together and then have them very secure, just sitting next to each other. Up until this point, did not own any DPN holder, but I saw them in diverse contexts and always thought they were super practical. So maybe half a year ago, I sat down and I cut out this fabric and I started making the first few seams, and then I stopped. And since then, these half sewn together pieces of fabric have been sitting in my home, waiting for me to continue working on them. To be fair, I had to take a break to wait for these buttons to arrive because I ordered a box of them. But even when the buttons did arrive, I didn't finish them until today, actually, until today. But I have done so, and I really want to make more with maybe some more fun fabrics. The thing about my fabric stash is that it's not very fun. It's mostly scraps and old textiles from around the house, like cut off jeans, cut off t-shirts, stuff like that. Cut off curtains as well. Yeah, we'll see. But actually getting back to the knitting, this is my only whip. It looks really weird, and you're maybe wondering what this is. This could be a sleeve, but it is not. It's a stocking. And I actually have the first one finished already, so let me get that. So this is the first stocking. It's unblocked, but I will hold out the foot for you like this. This is what it looks like. Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. This is actually following a pattern. The pattern is called Little Women. It's a free pattern by Garn Studio or Drops Design. And the design actually has a lace detail at the front and at the back and running down the foot. But I just took the numbers for the stitches and the inspiration for making this eyelet row up here and omitted the lace chart and then just followed the pattern like that because I'm making the sock for, well, historical-esque costuming. I think I mentioned last time that in this household, meaning my partner and I, we sometimes do some historical sewing and therefore also historical costuming, or historical-esque. And for that context, I found that I needed some stockings. And usually in the Middle Ages, it was more common to wear stockings that were sewn, but because I don't want to sew stockings, I'd rather knit them. I knit them. And that's just what I did. I'm using another Drops yarn. It's Drops Fable. This is their standard sock yarn with 75% wool and 25% polyamide. And this is the colorway number 121. So you cast on at the top, do a little bit of ribbing, then you do a eyelet row. I also modified the chart for this because there are 2 purl rows in there that I just converted into knit rows. And then you knit down the leg for quite a bit while doing some decreases. And then you knit the rest over normal sock. And yeah, this is a heel flap and gusset construction. I followed the instructions of the pattern. I don't have a standard vanilla sock recipe for myself. I like to experiment with sock patterns and try to not do the same thing twice. There are a lot of different heel constructions I have yet to try out. And I'm not quite sure, but I think I've never done a heel like this. Because you can see that the heel turn is square. It's a little bit different than the heel turn I do most of the time. And for this one, I used one whole ball up to somewhere here, and then attached the second one, which is nice because I only purchased 3 balls for this project. And then for this one, I started with the 3rd ball, so the new one, not the one I started for this one. And I am this far along. So currently I'm just knitting the leg, doing decreases, knitting in the round. It's very easy, very perfect for watching TV. Yeah, it's not very spectacular, neither in color nor construction, but I didn't want to just freestyle these stockings. I was looking for a pattern that I could use. This eyelet row here is where you will later thread through a ribbon of some kind, and then you're supposed to tie that ribbon so that the stocking doesn't slide down your leg, because although knitting is stretchy, it's not that stretchy, I find at least. So you have this ribbon kind of tied right underneath your knee, so where your calf kind of comes to an end, and this is your knee. Just below the knee is where you tie the ribbon. But for me, sadly, the leg turned out a little bit too long, so I will probably have too much fabric on the leg, but that will be fine. I'll see what happens after I wash them. It will be fine. So I am putting this back into my DPN holder. Yay! That's all of the projects finished or ongoing that I have to talk about today. But I would like to talk a little bit about my spring plans, as I mentioned in the intro. I have one cast on imminence. I really feel like casting it on. It has been on my queue for a while, and I do have the yarn in stash. And the yarn is this Natural Alpaca Pelo by Lana Grossa. And I talked about this last time already, I think. I'm planning to knit the Pressed Flowers Kerchief by Amy Christophers. And pink is usually not really my color, but I think it looks really nice with this brown. And it's very springy, so I'm very much looking forward to this. I'm quite sure this will be the next thing that I'll cast on. And then I also mentioned last time that I really want to knit another garment. It's been a little while. And what's been in my queue for a long time as well is to make a second To Me ranunculus. I have one ranunculus already. If I have a picture, I can put it here. I made it quite a while ago, and it's in red, and I don't really wear red. And I'm not a huge fan of the sleeves, how they fit. So I was thinking I want to make another one, preferably one with short sleeves. And because it is spring, there is a yarn in my stash that is really looking at me wanting to be knit up. And that is this yarn. This is Drops Baby Merino in the color 45 in this beautiful lemony happy yellow. There is no piece of clothing in my garment that is yellow. So I don't think I would gravitate to this that much, but I kind of want to have this color in my wardrobe. The thing is, the ranunculus is said to be able to be knitted up at any gauge, pretty much, use any yarn, any needle size. And that works theoretically with every pattern, but with the ranunculus it works especially well because there's a lot of positive ease intended to be in the final garment. So for me, if I were to make the first size, I would still have about 25 centimeters of positive ease, which is quite a lot. And for the first size with short sleeves, the pattern calls for 370 meters. With these two balls, I would only have 350 meters, so I'd be 20 meters short, which I'm thinking about playing yarn chicken. Well, so the thing is, I'm a loose knitter, so if I were to size down, maybe one needle size, going down to 5 millimeters instead of the recommended 6 millimeters, I could maybe achieve a fit that has less positive ease and would therefore use less yarn. But as I was preparing to film this, I looked through my stash, I got this yarn out, and I also saw another yellow yarn. This is the Isaiah Silk Mohair in this very nice yellow color. It's a little bit more muted. It's like a dusty banana. Not that I've ever used a Knitting for Olive silk mohair, actually. This is the color 59, and I think they would go together. They would make a nice color together. By the way, I keep a part of my yarn stash in plastic bags for moth protection reasons, but also they are in a kind of table that's quite open, and I move it around. It's a little bit hard to explain. It's a table from IKEA where you can put stuff inside and then just put a lid on top, and it's a table. And I found that putting yarn in there without it being in plastic bags, it kind of ages from the handling. So they're in plastic bags. Just a side note. But yeah, I think they would go together quite well. And I have 3 of these, so that would bring me to, I think, 636 meters of yarn, so I would definitely have enough of this. But do I want a short-sleeved lacy yoke sweater with a silk mohair? I don't think so. So yeah, I want to make the ranunculus. I want to use this yarn, but maybe those two are just not meant to be together. The other plans I have are a little bit more set in stone or matched together pattern and yarn wise. I want to be really careful about the crinkling. Okay, how do I do this? I have some unspun yarn from Honer och Er, and I purchased this yarn in December of 2024. I have used some of it in the Winter Soul sweater by Jennifer Steingas. I'm so happy to say that name. I finished that sweater at the end of this winter just passed. So it's quite a recent project. And I still have some of this beautiful unspun yarn left over in this absolutely perfect purple color. I cannot express in words how perfect this color is. This is my favorite color. I think most people would actually already call this blue, but to me this is purple. And I love it so much. And to go with this, I also last year already purchased this yarn. I hope you can see it through the plastic bag actually. This is the Seta Suri by Lana Grossa in the color 69. And yeah, they go together absolutely perfectly. They're basically the same color. I love it so much. I'm so looking forward to knitting with this. And with these I want to make an Amy slipover. Of course, heavily influenced and popularized by the lovely Inga of Knitting Traditions, who we have talked about, the designer of this lovely sweater pattern. She is, I don't know, obsessed is maybe a little bit of a big word. She has made a few Amy slipovers, and it's a pattern by Sun Is Gone that's annoyingly hard to get. You have to buy their booklet where the pattern is in. It's not available digitally, but I actually got my hands on the pattern booklet, and I want to knit the Amy slipover in this combination. So that is definitely coming my way. And then the last plan I brought with me today is again a purple yarn. And I think this is a color that most people would agree on is a purple. This is a yarn that was also featured in the last episode. This is the Austermann Merino Cotton with 230 meters per ball. It's a cotton merino mix with this super nice heather in this one. And with this yarn, I want to make the Barbro blouse by Knitting for Olive or Pernille Larsen. I also have the pattern. I'm a big fan of my library, and they luckily have the Knitting for Olive pattern book. So through my library, I have access to this pattern, and I have not yet gauge swatched for this, but I think this color would be absolutely nice for the Barbro blouse. So those are my spring knitting plans. I'm quite curious myself to see what I will cast on next and what will be shown in the next episode. I'd be curious to know what you're knitting on and what your spring knitting plans are. If you have any experience with any of the yarns I've mentioned or any of the patterns I've mentioned, please let me know what your thoughts about those things are. And I think that brings us to the end. So if you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I'm hoping to see you next week again. And until then, I hope you're happy, I hope you're healthy, and I'll see you next time. Bye!